Hey guys, what's going on? I got another 3 books for you here. I'm slightly behind in my book a week reading challenge, but I think I'm going to selectively pick some shorter ones so I can get back up to par. That'll feel good. Okay, per usual I'm going to start with the one I like the least, but this time I liked all 3 of them a lot, so no detriment to Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler that I talked about at first. I hadn't read Butler before, and for some reason I was under the impression that she had this very fanciful prose. It was very heavy, almost Edwardian. But the opposite is true. She was like Hemingway sparse, which I like. And Parable of the Sower follows a young female main character written in first person, kind of diary style, which you may notice is a trend for me. I like that. It's very readable, very casual. The book is set in the early 2020s when climate change and economic crises has thrown the world into chaos. But our main character lives a more secure lifestyle than most behind walls with her dad, who's a reverend, and her brothers. It reminded me a lot of The Walking Dead without the zombies, in that you can't trust anyone, resources are scarce, everyone's fighting for survival, including our main character who has a condition called hyperempathy, which means she physically feels the pain that other people feel, which I think is the most interesting aspect of this book. And I don't claim to know exactly what Butler is saying about it. Having empathy is dangerous. Having empathy will get you killed. And especially in a world where everyone else is shedding their empathy so that they have the ability to kill and steal, it takes a really strong individual to hold on to that empathy. And that is our main character here. It kind of reminded me of being in traffic on the highway and there's a slow vehicle lane and all these cars are flying past you. And then the guy behind you all of a sudden pulls out, inspired by the other people, and flies past you as well. You're watching the erosion of society in real time. Obviously that's like a super minuscule example when compared to this book, but the main character retains her empathy, and she accumulates a flock of people because she is like a torch in this dying world. And the most heartwarming aspect about this book for me is that she so desperately wanted to share her father's faith, but she was too rational, she was too logical, and she couldn't bring herself to believe in God. So she kind of shaped God into something that she could believe in. And a big part of the book is her kind of inventing a new religion that may bring this world out of the chaos it's in. I will say it took a little long to get going. It was more than halfway through the book, I feel like, until it really picked up. And there were a lot of characters. I couldn't keep track of them all. I've read a lot of science fiction novels, and I'm ashamed to say not a single one of them was written by a black author. And I did notice this book was skewed in a lot of unique ways that I was not used to. Obviously, my sample size is way too small to attribute that to any one group. So, I'll be looking for more black authors. I do have more Butler on my TBR. Any suggestions are appreciated. Oh, I did have a DNR, Lavinia by Le Guin, which is a shame because I've loved everything else I've read by Le Guin, but I couldn't get into this one. I feel like you either needed to be into poetry or ancient Rome or at least fantasy, and I'm not into any of those things. So, unfortunately, couldn't get through that one. Next up, we got The World Inside by Robert Silverberg. First Silverberg novel I've read, really enjoyed it. It's a series of loosely connected short stories set in a futuristic dystopia, most would say, where everyone's living in these enormous skyscrapers, and their biggest goal in life is to reproduce. That's where people get most of their meaning from, is how big their families are. I'm not sure if it's a critique on communism. It was written in the 70s, so I'm inclined to believe it was related to that. But it's definitely a nightmare, especially for us who have complete freedom and the ability to go outside and you know how fulfilling nature is. To be stuck inside all day, even though all your needs are taken care of and there's plenty of food and you can mate with whoever you want, and there's a big emphasis on recreational drugs, it's still a nightmare to me. My dad always manages to bring up this experiment in conversation about rats, where they have them all in this enclosure and they give them as much food as they could want and there's plenty of reproductive partners. And they go insane, kind of. They just spend all their time grooming themselves. And that's what I kept thinking of when reading this book. But the idea is that certain people are genetically predisposed to succeed in this kind of environment. They need less of nature. They're more satisfied by sex. And certain other people are not, but they see everyone else enjoying the hell out of this world and they're thinking, what's wrong with me? I can see it in myself as well. The inevitability of a digital consciousness and how completely against that I am. But slowly, I think generation to generation, people are having watches, people are going to have implants pretty soon. It's just a natural progression. And I'm not genetically predisposed to accept that. So when the time comes to upload to the cloud, I'm going to be that old geezer who refuses. And people are going to say, what's wrong with him? Doesn't he see that this is the way of the future? But you can't blame me. I'm not genetically predisposed like you are to accept technology into my life so openly. Can I be blamed for that? I think there's a certain level of foundational stubbornness, and I'm hesitant to call it stubbornness because there's a negative connotation there. But there's just certain things you can't change about people. So the book obviously has a lot of philosophical depth to it, which is kind of surprising because there's a description of orgies or boobs on like every other page, which admittedly makes it pretty engaging. I was slightly nervous once I started to understand the main concept of the book, because I thought it was going to argue that having children is a dangerous and empty pursuit, which is something I don't need right now. But that's not where it went. My only real problem with this book is that it has one of those vintage sci-fi ham-fisted dream sequences that just slaps you over the face with the moral of the story. He has a few chapters where he subtly introduces the idea and subtly hints about how you should feel about it. And then there's this dream sequence that just kind of ruins what he just did. But I can forgive him for that. Incredible book. And lastly, my favorite book out of the three, Never Cry Wolf by Farley Mowat, which is a non-fiction book. Can you believe it? I never read non-fiction. But this is my wife's favorite book, so I'm fairly biased in my opinion of it. She loves it. It's about a biologist who goes north into Canada to observe wolves and see their effect on the caribou population. The guy's definitely more a biologist than an author, so it has this very charming appeal to it. You don't feel like you're being goaded at all. You don't feel like anything's being exaggerated. You don't feel like you're being manipulated. It's just a great story. And very immersive for me, because I always wanted that rough and tumble experience of being dropped in the wilderness with a few weeks worth of supplies and just going for it, seeing what happens. It's a short book. You'll probably read it in a few sittings. But the message is really powerful. How fear and bias creep into our lives at all times, and we have to remain vigilant. And the ending, no spoilers, is really unique because it humanizes the villain and humbles the main character, which I really liked. And that's what I got for you today. There's definitely some book hauls in the future. I've been very lucky at library sales recently, and I want to share those books with you guys. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.